is just a brief summary about the Exeter College Green Impact Hackathon. So this is kind of like a data study that we do with the carbon credit database that's provided by Ally Offsets. Many thanks to Ally Offsets providing these opportunities. With the process, I think just very briefly, I'll talk about some of the motivations and then the guiding principles that sort of like lead us along the way of developing this workup and these deliverables. Some of these guiding principles sort of like changes and then very flexibly, changes along the way of our thought process as the time, as like during the process we had a lot of discussion and research into it. So yeah, although the presentation is organized in this way, it's actually way more nuanced. Many new guiding principles comes into place when we were actually doing the analysis. And I'll talk about the execution. It's just simply brief one-page summary. We actually meet a couple of times, but I'll go through some of the things that we did, and then the results and recommendations, which I believe we had a meeting a few weeks back. And then lastly, I'll just introduce the team and just thank everybody put in this amount of work, basically. So the motivation is that for Exeter College to be to supporting this carbon offset, we are allocated with 10k British pound, and this is sort of equivalent to like 2,000 units of carbon credits, and then we look at per metric ton of carbon how much we can offset basically. And at the beginning of the project, we had a few guiding principles, and obviously this is looking at like sort of like where we're gonna offset it, what kind of project that we wanted to offset, and then how much can we spend actually on per metric ton of carbon credits, and then some of the last two were like sort of newer guiding principle that come into the process, and these were sort of like these were more like in-depth discussion in terms of looking at the counterfactuals on which type of project will have difficulties to complete had they not been able to receive this type of funding from Exeter. And then lastly, we'll just be looking at how can we really maximize the impact of this lump sum of money of 10k. And so some of these guiding principles that sort of form a good basis. We largely, over the discussion across the team, we want to be able to fund a project that is off campus, so somewhere else. And we look at a few countries specifically, such as India, Sri Lanka, and a few Africa countries. And Gayatri has a few expertise understanding how the local infrastructure actually works, so that was really helpful in the process. And we want to be able to fund sort of like energy establishment systems, so it's kind of like infrastructure building for energy supply for the local region, more so than just sort of supporting domestic type of energy consumption. So you'll see more clearly later in the slide. And then we sort of drill down to a few different databases, a few different sort of, I would say, data sets from the databases. And we specifically look at the number of the retired credits and the number of issued credits and how many like remaining credits that is left per project. And this sort of allow us to look at whether the delivery of those projects actually are sort of like considered good in quality, because if the credits are still available in the market, since they were started very early on, it probably means that the execution of those projects wouldn't necessarily be trustworthy. So we were a bit worried about that. But yeah, and that was sort of like the only few metrics that we were able to look at. So I'll talk about the execution in just this one slide. We meet 2 Sundays, and I believe 1 Tuesday and 1 Friday. Together it was roughly like 2 hours every meetings. So for the very first phase, we sort of define a few like key metrics. and we specifically wanted to be a CORSIA eligible project for us to look at. And then for the offset type, ideally we wanted to look at whichever project that is focusing on removal instead of simply offsetting. And then we specifically also just filter down based on whatever project that is in the CDM registry. And I think Gayatri will be able to talk about that more. But ideally is that we just simply trust those like agency sort of, audited type of projects. And then in terms of location, obviously it will be Southeast Asia and Africa countries. And so that kind of allowed us to sort of like reduce the number of projects to look from like at least 3 to sort of like reduce it down to less than 50 projects to further look at. And at like second time and third time of our meeting, we sort of look at how big the project size is based on the number of credits that it is issued for those specific projects. And however, we also at this time realizes that we realize that the price of the carbon credits actually is way lower than we would have expected. And so there were a lot of like calculation in terms of the return. I don't really know how to explain this part, but maybe we can wait for Gayatri to come back to us. But yeah, we look at project size, we look at credit price and the age of those credits. And then we did like a few data analysis with VS Code, further narrowing down to sort of like 8 projects that we're looking at. And this will be the phase where we started to look into the documentations of how each project was set up, and they actually had good tables of reporting how much metric tons of carbons that each project is removing year by year. And so we look at those data set that is reported for each specific project. And so with these, we specifically sort of chose 2 projects that we were hoping to support. And the first one is the solar park. Both of them are like solar system establishment projects. And we look at both of their reports basically. And so the next phase is then deciding how much credits that we will issue in terms of like allocating how much money for both of the project. And so we build 3 different cases. Case 1 is by using 1,000 credits per project. So those 2 projects, each of them will get 1,000 credits. And then this will be the total investment. And we will end up with like quite a good chunk of money. And then that sort of lead us to looking into different use cases. And so the second case is I suggested to the team is to sort of just buy out all remaining credits. And the idea is that with that type of investment, we can then basically retire that carbon credit offset project, and therefore they don't need to seek out other sources of investment specifically. And we still have like quite a few of remaining projects. And the third one is buy off all the remaining credits for both of this project and some of others. And we had a few discussion about like whether this remaining fund can be utilized to sort of decarbonize the previous year's emissions for Exeter College, or we can utilize it to sort of like further develop new projects like the internship that Peter and Gayatri are working on. And so I think really finally what we sort of recommend us to do is to just to buy out those 2 projects that I mentioned before, and and seek for new development within the just like on site in the campus. And this is the team. This is the team we had. We had 2 JCR students, Aska and Kira, helping us out. They were very, very helpful during the first meeting. And then Hima was like champion along the way. Gayatri and Omar they were both in the chemical engineering group, and so they had a lot of expertise on specific carbon credit markets. And I myself, I supported with the VS Code and some of the coding experience. And we just want to thank Jacobus and Peter for the guidance, and we want to thank Ally Offsets for providing this database and make this project available, basically. That is it. Thank you, everybody.